One other thing, Lonnie, good to have you back with us. She is taking over the newsletter for Vicki. Now they're in a transition period. So in the meantime, you can get your announcements for the newsletter to Lonnie or Vicki. Or even Nick, maybe. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Well, it is good to see you all. I really enjoyed going through the book of Revelation. However, and actually, when it was over, I was thinking to myself, I kind of wish I could just do it again because there's so much to unpack and there's so much to deconstruct because so much of what I have been taught isn't even really necessarily in the book of Revelation or biblical. But I said last week I'm going to start a series on the life and times of Elijah, and this week, reading through the Old Testament, I'm like, oh, no, wait, I don't want to go back to Revelation. I love the Old Testament. So today is going to be a ton of information, and if your head hurts and you get lost, it's okay. Now, I will give you a little tip, because some people say, well, I can't understand it. There's too many names. There's too much this. How do you figure it out? Well, here's the tip. It's hard work. And the second part of that tip is, because this is literally what I do when I'm like really lost, I draw pictures of what I'm reading or I write it down. So like in this section today, we're going to go first through 1 Kings chapter 16, and we're going to be talking about 5 different kings and who kills who and when and law. And I literally just write it down, right? Okay, Jehu, son of Benaiah. He was a prophet. Great, Nadab, son of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. He was a king. Really, that's just how you do it. So there is no shortcut to learning because you just have to learn. You learn. So I don't want you to give up because it's such good stuff. And in the book of Joshua, God told Joshua, do not let this book of the law depart from your lips. Meditate on it day and night. And you can't meditate on something that you don't know. You see, in higher education, there's this idea that we get together and we talk about ideas. And that's good for higher education. You talk about ideas. But in lower education, and they don't call it that, I just did, you don't get to kindergarten and they say, Johnny, how do you feel about the letter A? What are your thoughts on it? It's like, no, you don't think or feel about the letter A. You learn the letter A. And then you learn B. And then you learn C. And a lot of understanding the Bible is simply learning it. It's simply getting it in you and understanding. So if you get overwhelmed with what we're going to talk about today, it's okay. Don't give up. You were overwhelmed with math. You were. Do you remember how traumatic it was when you just get addition and subtraction down, and then they're like, all right, we're stepping it up a notch, multiplication. And you're like, no, stop. Imagine if they would have stopped. If they just would have said, you're right, that's hard. Who needs multiplication anyway? Just count on your fingers the rest of your life. And your toes. And truthfully, the Bible is an ancient book in a foreign language, with a foreign culture, with names that are unlike our names. I mean, how many of you would name your kid Elah? What is that? E-L-A-H? Come on. Don't give up. Don't quit. God is your very great reward. So having said that, I'm going to give you some background before we even get to the background, because the series again is the life and times of Elijah. Today we're primarily talking about the times of Elijah. So I'm going to kind of, use a little bit of American history, which hopefully you have a better understanding of, and relate it to Israel's history, and maybe that will give you hooks to hang things on. First of all, Israel's glory days were under King David. And David was he was a man after God's own heart. And Israel did not flourish under David because he was a great political leader, although it does seem he had some political skills. And it wasn't just because he was a great warrior, although he probably is the greatest warrior in the Bible. It flourished because he led his people to worship God and be like God and honor God in everything they did. And by putting themselves in a position of being blessable, God blessed them. And then when David died, his son Solomon became king. And Solomon, the start to his reign was wonderful. If you remember the story, when Solomon was first king, God came to him in a dream, and he said, Solomon, what would you like? And Solomon said, I want wisdom, because I'm just a little kid, and I need to know how to govern this great people. And God says, well, because you didn't ask for long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I'm going to give you all of that. And then it says in 1 Kings 3, verse 3, Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking in his commandments. However, even at the beginning, the crack in the foundation was there, because one of the things that kings in the day would do was marry foreign wives of kings. Because if this king marries this king's daughter, well, obviously my father-in-law will be our ally. Well, God told Israel in the book of Deuteronomy, when you get a king, he is to write a copy of the law and read it every day. Why? So that he may learn to fear me. Because fearing God isn't natural. We have to learn it. And one of the things that God said in the book of Deuteronomy, which Solomon was supposed to read every day, was don't go back to Egypt for anything. I brought you out of Egypt. You don't need Egyptian horses. You don't need Egyptian chariots. I brought you out of Egypt. Solomon, right from the start, marries Pharaoh's daughter. And you're like, oh, I don't know if that's a good call, because you're not supposed to do that. And it seems innocent and maybe even like a good political move. But God had said, the Israelites weren't supposed to intermarry, because if you take their sons for your daughters and their daughters for your sons, they will lead them astray from worshiping me. And the most important thing to God, in fact, does anyone know the first commandment right off the top of your head? Yeah, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the truth is, all of the other commandments, you take that first commandment out of the way, they all collapse. Because what's supporting them? Why not lie? Why not kill? Why not steal? Well, because God says not to. And we are not to have any other gods before him. And there's a lot of ways, if you think about our relationship with God. I heard an interview this week between an atheist and an apologist. And the atheist was saying things like this. Well, if God is really so loving, then he should be like 7-Eleven. It should be open all the time for anyone. But he's like, no, you have to keep my rules. And I wish the apologist would have said, well, any relationship has that. Because this man, the man who was speaking, happened to love his wife. They've been married for 40 years. And I would have said to him, would your wife be in a loving relationship with you if you were sleeping with every other woman in town? I mean, there's a few rules that you have to follow. And there's some ways, there's a lot of behaviors that can destroy marriages, like complaining a lot. That wears people down. Leaving your socks all over the house, that gets a little annoying. Like not cleaning up after yourself, or the toilet seat up or down, or whatever, all those things. Here's a quick way. Have a wife before your wife. I'm using the Deuteronomy. Thou shalt have no other wives before me. That's what I was trying to do, Brenda. She's like, have a wife before your wife. I don't even understand how you do that. Yeah, but just tell your wife, hey, you know what? I'm just making you my number 2 wife now, because I picked another number 1 wife. That doesn't go very well. And that's what having gods before God is. That is the deal breaker. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And Solomon, he marries Pharaoh's daughter, and then he marries a few other wives, and a few other wives, and a few other wives, and a few other until he gets 700. And then he has 300 concubines. And as he gets older, he gets a little more careless. And his wives are like, well, Solomon, you worship your God. I should have a temple to my God. And I mean, Molech, what has Chemosh ever done to you? And so somehow Solomon is led astray and he worships other gods. And God says, that's it. I'm taking Israel away from you. But for the sake of David, your father, who loved me with all of his heart, I'm not going to do it during your lifetime. So when Solomon passes away, 40 years of glorious Israelite history, his son Rehoboam becomes king. And Rehoboam loses the nation. And now we have a civil war, except it's not a war. It's just like a civil leaving. Like the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, they just say to the southern kingdom, where Rehoboam, son of Solomon, is king, we're out of here. Bye. We're starting our own country. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, is their king. God says to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he's called son of Nebat because they didn't have last names. There's multiple Jeroboams. This is Jeroboam, son of Nebat. God says to him through the prophet, Jeroboam, you will have an everlasting dynasty if you will walk in my ways and honor me and follow me. I've taken the kingdom away from Solomon and I'm giving it to you. Obey me. The first move Jeroboam, son of Nebat, makes, because he's thinking, smart political man thinking. He's like, well, if all my people go to Jerusalem, because in the Old Testament they were told they had to go to Jerusalem to worship at the temple. If I let them go down south to Jerusalem to worship, they might be like, man, we like the palm trees and the ocean breeze. Not really, but you know, Miami has it. I might lose them. They might move down there. So I can't let them go. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it so they don't have to go worship in Jerusalem anymore. I'm going to put a golden calf in a northern city and a golden calf in a southern city, and I'm going to get my own priest so we don't have to go to Jerusalem anymore. And you might be thinking, well, that's a bad idea, because the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So Jeroboam leads the nation of Israel flat out into idol worship. Just straight out makes it the religion of the state. And God is like, what are you? And so he's going to take the kingdom from the hands of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So Jeroboam has a son, and his name is Nadab. And Nadab walks in the ways of his father Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So we got Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and Nabad, son of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. See how this works? It's a lot of fun. And then there's a guy named Baasha. And God told Jeroboam that your house is going to be destroyed. And by house, he means your family. Baasha assassinates Nadab. And Baasha becomes the king. Now, we are 64 years from the death of David. So if this was American history, we had Herbert Hoover as president, and then we had Bill Clinton as president. That's 65 years, give or take. That's the amount of time we're talking about. David's reign ends, Baasha's reign begins, and this is what it says in 1 Kings 16, verse 1. And the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani. Jehu was the prophet, not Jehu the king. This is son of Hanani, against Baasha. Since I exalted you out of the dust and made you leader over my people Israel. And you're like, well, wait a minute, you just told us that he assassinated a guy and became the king. Yeah, and God says, I allowed that. Because I'm the one who overthrew Jeroboam. Because I had promised if he had walked in my ways, he would have a dynasty. And he rejected me. That's how you became King, Baasha. Since I exalted you out of the dust and made you leader over my people Israel, and you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have made my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger with their sins, behold, I will utterly sweep away Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So because you've done the same things he did, I'm going to do to you the same things I did to him. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat. And anyone who dies in the field, the birds of the heavens shall eat. Now, this verse, this will be repeated multiple times. Oh, I went too far. Now, the rest of the acts of Baasha and what he did and his might, he was mighty. He did things. But if you want to read about his might, it's not in 1 Kings. You need to find a book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. And this is repeated over and over and over. Because truthfully, God doesn't really care what they did. He doesn't care about the cities they built. He doesn't care. What he cares about is, did you walk in my ways? Did you lead my people to worship me? And you didn't, Baasha. And so Baasha slept with his fathers and was buried at Tirzah. And Elah, his son, reigned in his place. So now we have our second king in chapter 16. Moreover, the word of the Lord came by the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha and his house. And it seems this is probably to Elah, both because of all the evil that he did in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands, in being like the house of Jeroboam, again, leading Israel into idol worship, and also because he destroyed it. Because now, killing Jeroboam and his family is being held against him. Because even though God said, Jeroboam, your house is done, Baasha did it in his own way, in his own hands, and God's like, you can't do that. So in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, and we'll hear about King Asa next week. So in the book of Kings, they talk about a king, and then they'll bring the other kings in him, and you haven't heard them yet because they're out of place. But it's basically because they're telling you the story of one king at a time and not all the stories going on at the same time. Next week, we'll read about Asa. He was the king of Judah. In the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel in Tirzah. And he reigned 2 years. So now Baasha's dead. Elah's king. His reign is only 2 years. You say, why so short? His servant Zimri, who was the commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. And when he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, they're just having, good old time on a Saturday afternoon. I don't know what day of the week or what time of day it was, but he's drinking himself drunk with Arza. And Arza was over the household in Tirzah. He was like the palace administrator. Zimri came in and struck him down and killed him in the 27th year of Asa. So he's gone. He killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned in his place. And when he began to reign, as soon as he had seated himself on his throne, he struck down all the house of Baasha. He did not leave him a single male of his relatives or his friends. You can't. Because if you're grasping for power, if his friends or relatives don't like that you struck him down in the middle of a party with his buddy Arza, they might come after you. And his sons have more claim to the throne than you, so you got to wipe them all out. So that's what Zimri did. Wipe them all out. Thus Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasha according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke against Baasha by Jehu the prophet, for all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, which they sinned and which they made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their idols. Because thou shalt have no other gods before me. So Zimri's king. And you say, well, maybe now we'll have some peace. Maybe Israel will again prosper. Maybe. Now the rest of the acts of Elah and all that he did Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned 7 days. Oh, that's a short kingship. Yeah, that's a short kingship. Now the troops, the Israelite army, they were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. So the troops are out fighting the Philistines. And Elah's back home with his buddy Arza having a party. And Zimri goes in and kills them. And the troops who were encamped heard it said, Zimri has conspired and he has killed the king. And when the army heard that, they were like, oh no, he didn't. Therefore, all Israel made Omri the commander of the army king over Israel that day in the camp. It's like, Zimri's not going to be our king. We want our commander Omri. Zimri just murdered the king. Omri is going to be our new king. So Omri went up from Gibbethon, and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. So now they're attacking where the king's home is. And when Zimri, that's the guy who just killed the king, who made himself king, when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the king's house, and he burned the king's house over him. Because like, hey, he's not going to get the king's house. I'm burning it down to the ground. And while he was burning it down to the ground, he said, I'm going to kill myself too. He burned the king's house over him with fire and died. And why did he die? Because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin. Because they just continue. None of them said, hey, we've got to go back to God. They just continued in their idol-worshiping ways. Now, the rest of the acts of Zimri and the conspiracy that he made, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? And then the people of Israel were divided into two parts. Because remember, the army was really a big fan of Omri, and they made him king. Well, now some of them are either second-guessing or like, well, we weren't part of that. The people of Israel were divided into two parts. Half of the people followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. So now we have two factions warring for who's really going to be the new king. If you don't get anything else, just pick up on this idea. It's pretty crazy. It's spiritually dark time. People are grasping for power. People are murdering people. But the people who followed Omri overcame the people who followed Tibni, son of Ginath. So Tibni died. We don't know how, but he's dead. And Omri became king. And this took 4 years because Zimri was killed in the 27th year. And now we're in the 31st year. Well, the next verse says that. In the 31st year of Asa, king over Judah, Omri began to reign. So for 4 years, there's basically been this civil war that wasn't really a war, but it's like, we like Omri, you like Tibni, we can't like you. He reigned for 12 years. 6 years he reigned in Tirzah. And if you're a new nation, you need a capital city. So he, Omri, bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver. And he fortified the hill, and he called the name of the city that he built Samaria. And Samaria, for the rest of the history of Israel, was the capital city of Israel. He called that city Samaria after the name of Shemer, the owner of the hill. Omri did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did more evil than all who were before him. And you're like, how can this, how? It's because morality leaks. It goes downhill. It always does. I mean, I remember being a kid and people talking about the Brady Bunch. It's like, oh, this shameless entertainment today. This family running. Now people are just going to be like throwing off their marriages and marrying because this is the story of a lovely lady. And look at the haircuts on those boys. It's just, oh, where are the good old days like Leave It to Beaver? That's June Cleaver and her apron. And you kind of think, well, yeah, whatever. Well, look, it's been a pretty steady slide. And so Omri, he did more evil than all who were before him. For he walked in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in the sins that he had made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. Because thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now the rest of the acts of Omri that he did, and the might that he showed, because he had might, he did acts, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. And Ahab, now that name might ring a bell. And Ahab, his son, reigned in his place. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. But his dad just did more than all. Yes, he did. And he learned well from his father. And morality leaks. Ahab did more than all. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, if it's a light thing to say, hey, let's worship idols, let's have state religion. We got a golden calf in Dan, we got a golden calf in Bethel, we got our own priests, we don't need God anymore, we don't need the temple in Jerusalem. If that was a light thing, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And he went, because if you marry a foreign wife and you were trying to make a political alliance, you have to do what is politically correct. And if she worships Baal, and if her father has actually named himself after this god, you have to. So he went and he served Baal. And he worshiped him because he married Jezebel. Well, I can't offend them by saying, oh no, I'll marry you, but I can't worship your God. Not only that, he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal. He said, when did they get a house of Baal? Well, he built it. Where? In Samaria. Wait, the capital city of Israel? Yeah. Ahab, in the capital city of Israel, builds a house to Baal, and he erects an altar to Baal. And Ahab made an Asherah. An Asherah? Yeah. The goddess Ashtoreth. By the way, she's on the come back. Like, more and more people are worshiping her today. Like, literally today. They're worshiping her. Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. And then the chapter ends kind of with the cherry on top. If you remember when Joshua conquered Jericho and they destroyed the city, Joshua put a curse on Jericho. He said, cursed is the man who rebuilds it. He will build its foundations at the cost of his firstborn son, and he will put up its gates at the cost of his youngest son. And for 500 years, people are like, stay away from Jericho. Just stay away. That city was destroyed. It belonged to God. It was destroyed. Stay away. Well, there's a man named Hiel of Bethel, which is a city in in Israel. Seems like he's an Israelite. He built Jericho. He laid its foundation at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and he set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. Excuse me. So, you can see there's a lot of chaos. People have completely rejected God. They're worshiping just about anything and everything. They're doing more evil and more evil and more evil and more evil, king by king by king by king. So there's a song, you've probably all heard it, you probably like it, Days of Elijah. And it's like, behold, he comes riding on. There's no God like Jehovah. There's no, and it's like a happy, peppy, cheery song. It's really not. I mean, the tune is. But the song is saying this, these are the days of Elijah. Famine and darkness and sword. And this is the world that Elijah was sent to. And he was sent with a message. Thus saith the Lord. And it was a dark, lonely time. But God loved the world. And he knew they weren't listening, and so he sent prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet. And as we went through this, you might have thought to yourself, kind of sounds like the world today. A little bit. And maybe, just like God sent Elijah, he is now sending you to be light in the darkness, to be love amongst the hatred, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Jesus, as he's dying on the cross. And there's a lot of things you could be thinking about at that time, like, ow, this really hurts. What he said instead was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And Elijah, and we're going to read about it, he was a man. He was a man. So may we, as the Apostle Paul writes, act like men. Let's pray. Father, thank you that even though the darkness is scary to us, you see through it, and you know, and you love, and you are in control, and we don't always know what that means, but we know that you never have to call emergency board meetings. You are sovereign. And so I pray that you help us to live out your love. This is my commandment, that you love one another. So just help us, Jesus. In your name, for your kingdom and glory, we pray. Amen.